You'll notice that there are no members of the board here tonight or the fiscal officer. That's on purpose. This is a meeting held by the administrator. It's a meeting that I've opened up to the public. There will be no minutes held at this meeting, although I do have Waycross here videotaping this meeting. For those that weren't able to make it, they can go back and view the comments. What we're going to try and accomplish tonight is some insight on what the next steps we should take as a township. So I'm going to spend a few minutes going through a presentation just to try to share some of the things that have changed over the past 5 years. But in doing so, I want to make sure we have some ground rules for tonight. Number one, be respectful. Don't judge somebody else's comment. We're not going to have a debate tonight on whether we think something should happen or something should not happen. That'll happen at a later date when this is presented to the board and we make some decisions on how we're going to address the future. Clarifying questions are welcomed, and finally, all options will be considered. So to just kind of give you an idea of what this is going to look like, for about the next 20 minutes, I'm going to go through some slides here, and I'm going to share some things with regards to the senior center, our parks, and our roads. Each of you are broken up in a group for a reason. Tawana Moulter is going to be facilitating the group to talk about senior center. Tim Lang is going to be talking to the group about our roads, and Frank Birkenhauer is going to be talking to the group about parks. I'm going to be walking around the room, just kind of listening. Chief Denny, Chief Cook, and Director Malloy is also here to assist where possible. When you have your small breakout sessions, after you've heard this presentation, what we want to hear from you is, what do you think we ought to do? And I'm just going to throw a couple scenarios. Should we close the parks? I don't think we should, and I hope many of you here don't think we should either, because our vision in this township is to deliver excellence to a best-in-class community. I don't believe you can be best in class without a robust park system, a senior citizen center to serve your community, and a road program that addresses public infrastructure. But you're going to see some of the difficult decisions we've had to make tonight, and we need some direction as to what the next steps are. So you've got sticky notes in front of you, and each of those sticky notes correspond to a color. I don't remember what the color is, it's on your note, but yellow is for one of the groups, blue and pink. So when Tawana comes to this table and she facilitates the conversation on seniors, you're going to pick the appropriate colored notepad and you're going to write down what would you like to see happen with this center? Do you want to see programs brought back? Be as specific as you want to be. During that 20-minute timeline, we're going to take all those notes and we're going to stick them up on a wall, probably over here. And then we're going to go to that group, and we're going to rotate so that at the end of the night, we're going to have a group of blue sticky notes, pink sticky notes, and yellow sticky notes. One's going to represent parks, community center, and roads. Those are going to be all of your ideas. It could be from closing a park to asking for a park levy to adding additional programs, bring back the 4th of July, cancel the Taste of Colerain. Whatever's on your mind, it can go on a sticky note. And then you're going to be given a sticky dot. Each person is going to get 4 green dots to be able to vote on the top 4 things that you see in every area. So you'll get a vote, 4 things on parks, 4 things on roads, 4 things on senior center. Then when that voting process is done, we're going to take all the sticky notes that have a dot on them, even if it has 1 dot, and we're going to place them on one wall, and you're going to have a color combination of blue, pink, and yellow, and you're going to be given 4 yellow dots to vote on what your top 4 is of that entire list. And then we're going to rank and prioritize every comment that was made, how it got a vote, and what the vote structure looked like. That, along with the survey that was conducted by NKU, will be presented to the board probably sometime around July 7th, which is the next board meeting, for a conversation piece and to help guide us in what the next step should be to address funding for our roads, our parks, and our community center. One of the reasons I was running late, and we have a number of members here from the Colerain Financial Advisory Committee, is we just met to adopt a tax budget for 2016. If you look at the budget for our consolidated roads, which is parks, community center, senior center, and roads, we are bankrupt in 2017. We have to find a solution. And the only way we're going to do that is together. And that's why I thought this focus group was very important, is to bring various segments of the community in so that we can hear what you had to say, take that message back to the board, and develop next steps to address those concerns. So I'm going to run through this presentation, and then we'll have a brief opportunity to ask any clarifying questions with each facilitator. Rather than do it as a large group and waste a lot of time, we're going to do it at the small group facilitation. So if you see something as I'm going through here on the senior center that you have a question, write it down, and then when the facilitator gets to your table, that person will clarify what the point was made. So as we look at our senior center, thinking back to 2010 and where we are today, and I will be glad to put this presentation out online so anybody can go download it, because I know it's going to be difficult to see for many of you. But back in 2010, we had a full-time director, a full-time program coordinator, an administrative assistant, a Title III service provider, and a transportation driver, as well as 3 part-time custodians to support this senior center up here. In 2015, we're down to 1.5 people. We have an events coordinator that's shared with Parks, and we have a custodian that's shared with Parks that helps do setup and tear down. We also have a contracted program coordinator that is now through the YMCA that assists us with our Council on Aging program. In 2010, our membership fee was $5. Membership fees now are $20 a year for residents and $30 for non-residents. We no longer have a full-time arts and crafts instructor. There's no more evening classes open to the entire community, and the evening special events such as dances, holiday events have all been cut. Wrong way. Some of the programs and services that have been cut include arthritis exercise, bowling, chair volleyball, we play, movie matinee, bunco, health rhythms, drumming, book club, computer classes, massage therapy, informational speakers, Zumba, instructor-led Tai Chi, Pilates, flu shots, immunization clinics for children, tax assistance, and home-delivered meals. We've also cut watercolor painting, oil painting, porcelain painting, ceramics, stained glass, stamping, scrapbooking, and jewelry making. Talked about Zumba, line dancing, Lego camp for kids, yoga, Fit Spod, youth karate, and Fit Chicks. In 2010, the budget to operate this center was $541,000. Today, it's $145,000. That's how many cuts we've made to this center. We do not have adequate staffing, especially in the janitorial area. Our grounds maintenance and landscaping is suffering. We are no longer proactive in dealing with maintenance issues. We deal with them as they come up. We don't have a planned maintenance program because we don't have the money. We have a need to replace some damaged and worn out equipment, and we just don't have money for upgrades to keep it marketable. Some of the positive changes. In 2010, we had 34 rentals. In 2014, we had 87. In 2015, through the end of May, we have 70. Tawana has done a great job of bringing revenue sources in because the rentals that we use over in Hall A in the community center is what allows us to keep the senior center open. However, without basic maintenance and preventive repairs to the interior and exterior, it's going to negatively impact the rentals in the future. So we've got to be able to protect that source. In March of 2015, we partnered with the Clifford YMCA. Well, why did we do that? Well, the Clifford YMCA is in the business. They actually provide services to seniors. So you've got this YMCA providing services and we're providing services. So it gave us an opportunity through a shared service partnership to try to combine some services, bring their staff in, their expertise in, save some money, and enhance the services for our seniors. And we're going to evaluate that program at the end of this year. That contract expires next February, and we'll reevaluate to see whether we proceed in 2016. Right now, I have included it in the budget for 2016, but I do want an opportunity to evaluate it and get some feedback on its success. Some of the other things that we've done up here, senior party and our casino trip. So let's shift gear to parks. Up until 2011, when the state budget, the state legislature cut us $1.5 million, a lot of decisions had already been made to invest in our park system. We have one of the most robust park systems in Hamilton County, and we should be very proud of that. Unfortunately, we don't have the money to maintain the park systems. We have 11 parks and 232 acres. Clifford, Colerain Heritage Memorial, Drew Campbell, Groesbeck, Heritage, Meehan. Actually, Meehan is now being given back to Hamilton County as a result of budget cuts. No longer maintaining it, we gave it back to the county. Dravo, Palm Park, Skyline Community Center and Park is up for sale. If you don't know that already, that's one of those other issues as a result of budget cuts. And Wirt Park. In 2005, we had 9 full-time employees in the parks, 14 seasonal, and 6 day camp counselors. Now we have 4 full-time, a part-time admin assistant, a shared custodian, 15 seasonal workers that we have to use to staff and collect parking permit fees, and also maintain our spray ground and some maintenance of our bathrooms in the parks, and 4 seasonal maintenance workers. In 2005, we were improving and expanding our parks. We were building new playgrounds. We had a free summer camp, Friday entertainment, movie concerts, 4th of July, Taste of Colerain, Easter egg hunts. Our shelter rentals for residents were $70. For non-residents, they were $85. Our soccer fields were free, and our baseball fields were $200. In 2015, we had the Taste of Colerain. We still do our summer concerts, our summer movies. We now charge for admittance in the park, a $10 pass for an annual fee. Shelter rentals are now $135 for residents, $225 for non-residents. Soccer fields are $150 for recreation, $180 for select, and baseball fields are $375 and $425 for grass infields. In 2010, our parks budget was $1.4 million. Today, it's $433,000. If you drive into our parks, you're going to see weeds, you're going to see tall grass, you're going to see things not maintained in the pristine condition that we have always cherished. And I'll tell you, it's a very difficult decision when I meet with our parks employees because they take a lot of pride in what they do, and I have to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't give you resources, you're just going to have to do with what you have. And that means you have to prioritize, and that means we're going to have long grass, and we're going to have weeds on our fences. Our staffing and maintenance at all the parks is suffering as a result of inadequate resources. Without a long-term funding solution, our parks will be forced to close. There is no doubt about it. There's not going to be an option. I have a map in this presentation of where our parks are. I'm not going to get into all these details, but every slide here talks about what's included in the park. From a mega land to a basketball court to a volleyball court to playgrounds to baseball fields and soccer fields. You go to Heritage, you got a Frisbee golf course, you've got a river. We have got a phenomenal park system. You'll notice Kevin Schwartz not here tonight. Kevin's been our parks director. Kevin was a great parks planner. Unfortunately, as a result of budget cuts, we had to reduce his position. His last day was last Friday. Good news for Kevin is he's now a consultant, I believe, with Butler Metro Parks. I think that's where he went. So he's going to be able to use his expertise in another community. I'm really glad for him. But there's a lot of information here on our parks. Once again, I'll make this presentation available to you for review. But it takes a lot of money and resources to maintain this. And I know I've heard comments made, well, why did the board invest all this money in parks? Well, when the decisions were made to expand the parks, and we're still paying debt on some of these parks, we had no idea the state was going to take the estate tax and cut our local government fund in half. So that's $1.5 million that we lost as a result of the state action that dramatically impacts this township. So, roads. Unlike the senior center and the parks, which I would hope everybody in this room would argue is a good quality of life program, parks and a senior center is not a core function of township government. The core function of township government is public safety, police, fire, EMS, and roads. And right now, if you drive through this township, whether you're on a county road, a state road, or a township road, there is a great need for public infrastructure improvements. And one of the reasons that we're combining this conversation this morning, or this evening is because I think that there's probably a lot of different interest in this group as to where your priorities are. I see a young man sitting here who I think probably has used our parks before and would hate to see the parks close. I see seniors here that probably use this center. I know there are people that live on township streets. There are people that live on county roads. So you may say, well, I live on a county road. Why do I want to fund a road levy for township streets? I would argue that if we have a funding source to address public infrastructure, it would allow me to do like Green Township's doing and provide a matching grant with Hamilton County to pave our county roads, a partnership with ODOT to fix some of our state highways. I look at this as a global township issue, not just a township street issue. As you look at the roads, and you may have heard this from a neighbor, and I'm going to be very clear when I get to the budget here, we collect about $1.8 million from the state from 4 major sources of revenue for our roads department. Somebody once told me, well, why don't you just take $1.5 million of that 1.8 and go out there and resurface roads? That $1.8 million pays for salt, maintenance, drivers, the people that remove your snow in the wintertime, the people that mow the right-of-ways, that clean out the culverts, and you're going to see some pretty staggering statistics here. We have 9,000 street signs in this township that we have to maintain. You can't do that without a staff. You have 112 street miles, 43 square miles, or 480 streets. Even though I don't have money to resurface, we're still sealing, fixing potholes, removing snow, maintaining our streets. We have 350 cul-de-sacs. We have to maintain our storm sewers. We have right-of-way, permits, mowing, tree removal, guardrail maintenance. 3,351 catch basins that have to be cleaned out to make sure that water is flowing. That can't happen without a staff. And we have 9 snow routes. I talked a little bit ago about our park staffing. As you look at our roads department, we had 15 full-time and 2 part-time and 5 seasonals in our road department in 2010. Now we have 10 full-time, and we're soon to have 9 effective August 1 of 15 because I had a retirement come up. That person's not going to be replaced. I'm budgeting that position for some future revenue source, but we're not filling any positions that retire or resign until we figure out how to solve this problem. We still have grinding and patching pavements, partial depth repair, full depth pavement repairs, surface treating, landscape mulching, post painting in subdivisions, litter pickup, skip funding, matching funds for major projects. All these things, a lot of them has already been eliminated. We no longer treat our fields. We don't treat or we don't do the litter pickup that we used to. So our road and our public infrastructure is deteriorating just like our parks. So our current challenges, the average age of our paved service is 25 years. Our pavement condition index. Now Tim can get into more detail when he sits down at your table as to what that means, but basically it's a rating scale on how they grade your streets. Colerain is a 41, or if you think about an ABCDE or ABCDF report card, we're a D right now. We need to pave at least 4.36 miles a year or $1.3 million to somewhat try to address an upward swing in our resurfacing plan. In 2015, we're going to do less than a half mile at $375,000. We also got $325,000 in a community development block grant that can be used in low-income neighborhoods. We have no matching funds for skip grants. A skip grant, we can get into more detail, but basically it's a total tear out all the way down and resurfacing all the way from gravel up. Those projects are usually about $1.5 million. The township would pledge 30% and we'd get a state grant. We have no matching funds available. We have aging equipment. We just went through the capital budget request. I recommended no capital budget items for our roads and our parks department because once again, we don't have a funding source. We need to maintain current staffing even though we have declines in state funding. And it's important to maintain our snow routes. Even with 9 snow routes, we get calls in the wintertime about our streets not getting as cleaned as fast as people would like them. I think our guys do a great job. But imagine if we don't find a solution to offset our 2017 problem and we have to start stretching those routes longer and longer and longer. I talked a little bit ago about the $1.8 to $2 million in revenue. In 2010, we received $2.1 million, almost 2.2, from these sources of revenue. In 2015, we're slightly below that due to some state changes and cuts. But once again, all that money is used to pay for repairs, contract service, supplies and materials, vehicle equipment, salaries and fringe benefits, utilities, property liability insurance, everything it takes to operate your parks and your road department without resurfacing. So, in a nutshell, when you think about non-safety, don't think about public safety, police, fire, and EMS. Just think about non-safety. As a township, we manage probably close to 25 different funding sources. If you looked at my investment statement, you would see that we have invested about $19 million in the bank. You might say, if you got $19 million in the bank, why aren't you using it to fix our roads? The majority of that funding is restricted. You can't use it for things like roads. Restricted for police, restricted for fire, restricted for this and that. So our discretionary funding is limited. When you think about non-safety, I think about, well, what is the value to the community? Not necessarily what's the cost to the community, what's the value to the community? Everybody in this room values things differently. I may value a senior program or a park program, or I'd like to have my streets repaired. Now, we already talked that roads are a core fundamental purpose of township government, and ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to have to address it at whatever cost that is. But I would say, and I hope that most of you feel this way, that our senior center and our parks does bring value to the community. It brings value to your property values. As you look at the entire community as a whole, those are valuable functions of the township. I talked about the roads being made up of township streets, county roads, and state highways. We have to figure out a solution to maintain our public infrastructure. Up until 2001, we had a 1 mil road levy to resurface roads. It's my understanding that sometime around that 2001 timeframe, it was proposed to increase that millage to get ahead of the road infrastructure program. I think they might have asked for 2 mils and it failed. As a result, we lost the 1 mil levy, and since 2001, we've not had a dedicated funding source for roads. The general fund was used up until 2011 when the state cut the budget, and since then, we've been putting a little bit of money here and there toward that. In November of 2014, we proposed a 1% JEDZ, a Joint Economic Development Zone. I'm not here to debate the merits of the issue. I will tell you that it was a unique way to generate funding without taxing the residents. It failed miserably. As a result of that, the JEDZ legislation is no longer an option. That legislation ended December 31st of 2014, so you can no longer consider that as an option. So we are in a funding crisis. We've lost $1.6 million, 60,000 in TPP for the road, but the rest of it pretty much impacted the general fund, which is what we've been using to sustain our parks, our senior center, and our resurfacing program. As I said earlier, in 2010, our senior budget was $540,000. Today it's $145,000. Our parks was $1.4 million. Today it's $433,000. Our road budget was $1.9 million. Today it's $2.2 million. We are spending more money because it costs more to buy salt, to buy fuel. Those are still costs that take to maintain our roads. And when I say roads, I'm not talking about resurfacing. I'm talking about sealing, patching, catch basins, signs, all those things. So tonight, our goal is, what options do we have? As a member of this community, what option do you see viable going forward? I want you to be honest. I want you to be as to the point as possible. If you think a park should be closed and there's a particular park you want to close, write it on your sticky note. If you think I should lay off all 10 people in the road department and not remove snow anymore, write it down. There's no dumb question. Put it down on paper so we can get it up on the board and have a conversation. There are options. I don't think there are very good options. We could close this center. We could sell this center, just like we're doing the Skyline Community Center. And you know, Skyline Community Center was a very difficult decision, but ultimately, at the end of the day, 70% of the people using the Skyline Community Center were Springfield Township residents. So once again, the Colerain residents are subsidizing a center that is primarily used by another government. It's a tough decision. We could close parks. That becomes a little more difficult, but if we had to put fences up in front of the parks and let the grass grow long, I would hate to see us have to do that, but I can reallocate staff, or I can lay staff off and not maintain those parks if we have to do that. I don't think it's a good option, but it's an option. We talked about reducing staff. JEDZ is no longer an option. We continue to go to Columbus and lobby for more money. We have spent, I've been here almost 4 years. In the 4 years I've been here, we've done nothing but grind cost, spend money, or reduce money as much as possible. Our employees have taken 4 years of pay freezes. They pay 20% of health care. I'm proud of them for doing that. There's no other government around sacrificing as much of the employees here. We no longer have a step system. Usually in the government sector, you come in at step 1, and over the next 7 years, you grow. We don't here. You come in at step 1, you're frozen except for a probationary level. Our employees have stepped up and addressed real cost issues. Trustee Ritter and I went to Columbus to meet with the leadership, and we gave them a whole presentation on Colerain. The governor has asked us to model cuts and shared services. We've done it. We've delivered. What are you going to do for us? Instead, this biennial budget that's being presented, they're going to cut another $47,000 from us. Why don't you reward a township or a government that's taken the steps to address spending like we are? If you don't want to increase our operating budget, I get that. But give us some one-time money. Give me a check for $1.5 million and let me go repave some roads. Don't just do things for communities that aren't addressing their spending. We have some other options. These are going to be very unpopular, but they're options. We could do a parks levy. We could do a senior levy. We could do a roads levy. Or we could do a combination levy. Something that we could generate funding to be able to put money toward our senior center, our parks, and our roads. I pledged to the board 4 years ago when they hired me I would not ask for a levy until I felt the budget was aligned to the degree that any further deterioration would dramatically impact the quality of life in Colerain. And I believe that's where we are today.
So early in June, I actually engaged a focus group to talk about some of the funding challenges that we're facing with our parks, our roads, and our senior center. And we hosted that evening at the senior center. We probably had a good 60 people in attendance, and we went through a process of really just engagement and open conversation about how we can address some of those concerns in the non-safety service department. As everybody probably in this room knows, we've been working on budget sustainability for the past several years, and we've pretty much got our budgets aligned to the point that we're living within our means, with the exception of our non-safety departments. So what I'm going to put up here this evening is kind of the results of that meeting. The full presentation, as well as the results, all the comments that were made, and the actual video of the event can be found on our website at www.colerain.org, and I would encourage you to go out there and look at that. The purpose of the meeting was to gain insight on options to address funding deficiency for parks, roads, and senior center, and I indicated there where the entire presentation can be found. Some of what we talked about that evening, when we think about non-safety, from a government perspective, our core purpose is to provide for public safety, police, fire, and we have to provide roads. There are other things that make a community great. And when I put value to the community, when I think about non-safety, whether it's a senior center, a park system, or a number of other things, we just talked about the Taste of Colerain, there are a number of events there that make a community best in class. And I don't want to underestimate or undersell the fact that everything we're going to talk about here is very important, but it does become an issue of how we're going to continue to generate resources to be able to manage these programs. As we look at our senior center, we operate a senior center as a value to our community. This service is instrumental in delivering best-in-class service. While it's not a core township function, we have made enough reductions in the senior center now that in cooperation with the YMCA, we're able to run a program to at least provide some basic services to our senior population, whether it's a meals program, transportation, a variety of other programs. There's been a lot of feedback that they'd like to see that enhanced, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the recommendations that came out that evening as it relates to the senior center and the community center. The Parks Department, we have a very robust park system. We've invested millions of dollars in providing the parks to our residents. A lot of these decisions were made prior to the 2011 budget cuts from the state of Ohio, and since that time, we have been looking at ways to continue to operate our parks and keep us in that financial sustainability mode. I believe very strongly that parks are an instrumental part of a community, and it would sadden me to have to close parks. I don't even want to consider that right now as an option, although that's something we talked about at the focus group meeting. Our road department. You know, Colerain's very interested. We're made up of township streets, county roads, and state highways. And, you know, maintaining public infrastructure is a vital function of township government. And we operate about 101, 106 road miles in the township. There's probably an equal number of roads that are county roads that aren't our responsibility, and a number of state highways as well. In a perfect world, we would have funding available to address our township streets, as well as potentially put matching funds there for county roads or for state highways. And I know Green Township, as an example, through their residential TIF money, have put up millions of dollars to improve county roads within the township that we don't have the luxury of doing. We had a road levy in the amount of $1 million that was in place through 2001. There was an attempt at that point to raise the millage, and it was defeated. And since that point in time, we've lost that revenue necessary to resurface our streets. Since the defeat of 2001, we've relied heavily on our general fund to provide money for resurfacing. That funding available within the general fund was eliminated in 2011 as part of the state budget process. In 2014, we attempted a 1% JEDZ tax, which was basically an innovative way to tax our non-residents. And we thought that would be an opportunity to generate about $1 million to be able to put in our infrastructure. That issue was soundly defeated. JEDs are no longer permitted under Ohio law, so that's no longer an option that we can consider. I view us in a funding crisis as we look at the total loss of $1.6 million from our state tax, our local government fund, TPP money. Our road fund has lost TPP in the amount of $60,000, and what little amount of money, about $47,000 we get currently in tangible personal property reimbursements, as my understanding has been eliminated in this most recent budget in Columbus. As you look at our spending, in 2010 we were spending $541,000 in the senior center. We're now spending $145,000. Our parks department, we were spending $1.4 million. We're now spending $433,000. In our roads department, we were at $1.9 million. We're up to $2.2. But I would put a note there that we have shifted the personnel cost associated with maintaining our park system into our road department because the general fund can no longer be aligned without spending down reserves. So we've shifted that into the road department. Some options to think about. Could we make additional cuts to our community center, possibly sell the community center, close or sell parks, reduce staff? If we reduce staff any further than we currently are, it's going to result in longer grass, fewer snow routes in the winter, and a further deterioration of our roads. The JEDZ is no longer an option under Ohio law. We continue to make efforts to lobby our state for more money, but I think even the schools will testify in this latest budget what the governor's done in eliminating tangible personal reimbursements to a number of the larger school districts in Hamilton County that stand to lose as much as $24 million over time. But we will continue that fight in Columbus to try to get revenue back to the township. There are levy options. You could consider a parks levy, a senior levy, a roads levy, a combination levy. These were all things we talked about at that focus group. So within those 60 individuals that participated that evening, there were a lot of comments made in an attempt to try to categorize those into maybe the top 3 categories and the top 3 values. The results are the highest number of votes that came in with regards to the parks is to look at community partnerships. Consider selling park rights or adopt a park program using volunteers to reduce cost to the township. In the road department, miscellaneous was something that I categorized it under, and the suggestion was to subcontract snow removal as a potential savings. Now, many people know that we tried that. We actually did a bid last year or 2 years ago, and we got no responses in. And there's collective bargaining issues, obviously, anytime you go to subcontract work. But that was a suggestion, and I wanted to put it up there. Our senior center, look at community partnerships. We have one right now with the YMCA. That'll be evaluated at the end of the year. And a comment that kept coming across is consider an OSHA lifelong partnership program. And I went out and I Googled that today because I really wasn't sure what it was. And it's an educational partnership through UC. And they have a number of different locations where they provide lifelong learning. So that may be an option for us to look at as far as utilizing that space from a sustainability perspective. The second highest votes in the parks area, in the roads area, talked about funding options, and the overwhelming number of people that considered funding options thought that a combination levy was the best approach. Put money into parks, and the road department. On the senior center side, the focus was on PR and marketing. There were a lot of comments on changing the name away from a senior center to a community center. As you know, right now, half of it's a senior center, half of it's a community center. And we utilize the rental income off the community center pretty much to sustain the operations on the senior center. And then the third highest vote was to close or sell park properties, close some parks. On the road side, do PR marketing, create a grassroots campaign as it relates to the need to address our public infrastructure. And on the senior center side, sell or close the property. And I know those are options to think about. None of those are easy options to think about. And I'm not here tonight to advocate any of those. At this point, we're just gathering information. So as we think about next steps, we want to continue this conversation with the community. Continue to take engagement in various meetings, various circles. Look for opportunities to increase volunteer efforts. I talked about meeting with the Colerain Community Association to see if there's a way that we can facilitate more volunteers into that group. It's already an established group, and how we might be able to make that work. Continue to seek partnerships to sustain our non-safety service departments in our parks and our community center. We do have a lease agreement with the Groesbeck Athletic Association that operates, or the Colerain Athletic Association that operates our Groesbeck Park. That will be evaluated at year end. As I indicated, we'll continue our lobbying effort in Columbus. We'll continue efforts to drive efficiency and control our cost, and to identify funding options for public infrastructure. So that's kind of a recap of that evening. What's going to happen next, probably at the August meeting, is I'm going to ask Mr. Birkenhauer to give a presentation on the results of the community-wide survey that we did, and kind of give some perspective on some of the questions that were asked and answered in that survey. And then sometime later in the year, we're going to be considering a budget this evening for 2016. As you know, the changes can be made through the appropriation process in December and January, but we'll continue this conversation as we still are on our goal to sustain ourselves through 2022. Any questions, board?
No, just a comment. Thanks for spearheading that effort, and I think the input is very valuable to the board as we consider options in the future. I want to also thank everybody who participated, used that time out of their life to give us that input. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also commend Jim and Frank and Director Malloy and the whole leadership team. This is kind of a challenge I don't think Mr. Rowan thought he'd have into his tenure as administrator here. And everybody thinks they have the silver bullet in government, and the challenges that this township faces with the amount of service that we still provide, quality public service, public safety, it's a testament to the leadership team. And I hope that the residents understand how much that team cares about this community and our families. I just wanted to make that clear, because I know that the board, sometimes we take it for granted, but the board really appreciates the efforts there.
Thanks. The other thing I want to also add, with respect to the general fund areas, specifically roads, parks, and senior center, is local government. I want everybody to understand, and you probably do, local government is significantly different than the federal government or even the state government. They have addressable spend, this big, where they have a lot of levers they can push and pull to balance the budget and make things work out. They have a lot more spend they can cut to balance things out. Our general fund is $6, $7, $8 million, and you just don't have all those levers available from a macroeconomic perspective to try to make things balance. And so it really comes down to cutting more cost and services or raising revenue. So, and with the defeat of the JEDZ last fall, really the only option going forward is a levy. So that's something the board will consider in the future. But for now, these options are very helpful for us. But I want everybody to just understand that, for the simple reaction of, gee, why don't you just cut more spending? It's very difficult where we're at right now, especially when you consider the numbers Mr. Rowan put up in terms of the money we've already cut out of all those areas. So, it's pretty much on life support as it is.